I'm happy to be back here at the Platform Summit. The first time I was here was back in 2017. Then I was just in the beginning of my API journey, and so was the bank. So I'm representing Nordea, and I've been in the banking for quite a long time, done many different things, mostly always in the area of delivering customer services through various technologies. And I was given this assignment there was a prediction from a strategy in Nordea that there was a technology shift happening or going to happen in the market. I mean, the whole internet banking followed by mobile banking would eventually be replaced by the new technology that we saw the big techs using, the API platforms and the marketplace and so on. And my assignment was to ensure that Nordea would be able to compete and collaborate in this new market in 2020. So that was the assignment I was given in 2016. On top of that, I also got the assignment to deliver on PSD2, the Second Payment Service Directive. Back then, it didn't seem like such a big thing. And God, what wrong I was. That has become sort of a monster, taken over everything in my life. And it totally took over my initiative. But it also meant that I was actually guaranteed funding for a number of years to come. Because if there's something that the bank really need to, that is to follow the law. So that got the highest priority. I mean, commercial initiatives, normally the top management can, they have a quite short time span where they are interested and can accept that you go on. But if you don't deliver within 2 years, then you're out. And taking in a totally new technology and do something meaningful with it doesn't happen in 2 years. So I was very happy for the compliance funding after a while. We see the whole API revolution as moving into embedded banking. And I will now tell you what we sort of had to do, because we were told to open up the bank systems. That was the meaning with PSD2. We called it open banking, or I called my team open banking, something I come to regret afterwards, because now everything is called open banking everywhere, And it's not, but then we were it was my team, that was the thing that was called open banking back then. And our assignment was to open up the bank systems to let third parties access your customer data and the services you usually use to, for example, do checkouts in e-commerce and so on. So the third parties should be able to interface you as bank customers and treat us more as a back end for the services. And I mean, my small task then was, together with my friends in IT, to figure out how should we actually make this happen. Of course, there existed APIs in the bank. We have a huge IT division, or we have several actually IT divisions, but they were for internal purposes. There were some practices to interact with external parties, but it was not like they had any platforms or softwares for it or anything that was scalable. And I needed to be scalable. If there was something I knew that I needed to be able to, it was scale. Because there could be, I don't know how many third parties are out there. And I mean, as soon as we started to talk about this, we put out we put out a poster on the website in February 2017 asking, is there anybody out there that want to beta test our first developer portal? We had hoped for maybe getting in contact with 5, 10 of you guys. I mean, it was a total, tornado of interest. And I mean, we were told, the sign-up page more or less crashed and so on, and everyone wanted to join. And we were so perplexed because I thought that we were late into the game. I thought that the train had already left the station. I thought that all other banks were already on the go. But it turned out that no one has even started with this. No one was building the API solution for third parties. So when the first bank started to talk to them, they were over enthusiastic. So we got a lot of these that wanted to be the beta testers. So then it just happened. So then we needed to figure out, okay, how can we ensure that the computers of these parties can actually interact with our own seamlessly, real time, and all of that stuff, using RESTful APIs. How can we make this happen? And that was when we realized that we absolutely needed to buy an API management platform so we could create a completely new layer or a completely new front end that could interact with the third parties that was totally separate for whatever we had in terms of internet banks or mobile banks and so on. This was something else. It should provide more or less the same services as a mobile bank, but it was a completely different way of talking to the outside world. And here I also learned something new, and that was that it was about interoperability. It's a very difficult word to say, actually, so I usually don't use it. But, I mean, the whole point was that any computer should be able to access our solution. We couldn't know what kind of hardware or software that was. We didn't know what kind of language they would be talking in. So we would have to be totally agnostic for technology or languages or whatever. And we needed to be able to provide a service that was up and running all the time. It was a one-to-many scenario that didn't exist in, for example, our mobile banks. That is constantly a one-to-one scenario. There is one user logging on, using its data and so on. Our scenario was, it could be, we didn't know how many, and we didn't know at all what kind of use cases they would implement. We would have to be prepared for anything. And there was also a need to have a very easy to change environment on both sides. We needed to be able to come to deployment much faster than I was used to. I had been head of channels in Nordea before I got the open banking assignment. And I mean, I had an internet bank for large corporates where I could get maybe 4 releases a year. That was a good year. The last year when I had it, I had only 2 releases. And I knew that we need to be much better than that. Today, we can deploy bi-weekly. That is a little better than 4 a year. But I want to go to weekly next year. That would be sort of better than that. We don't really have to be. We also needed to be able to avoid the complexity of the back-end systems. I mean, we are a big bank. We are a product of mergers of other big banks. I mean, I can reveal the fact that we have a lot of old systems. And we can't just ditch them and build new. That's not sort of especially cost efficient, especially since the technology changes every 10th year, as I showed you on a previous slide. So how could we then create this extremely flexible, easy to change environment if the applications were point-to-point integrated with an extremely complex backend. So we needed to get away from that old-fashioned way of building systems. So a totally new architecture was implemented for us, or by us. In the beginning, we thought that, okay, one layer of APIs will do it, but it didn't. We need to have several layers of APIs. We needed to have the flexibility, same flexibility as we had towards externals. We also needed to have towards our internals, backends, so that the place where we did all the intelligence, all the user stuff, where we needed to deploy bi-weekly, that is the layer called open banking here. That microservice structure needed to be extremely or very decoupled from both front and back, so to speak. And then also naturally having the third parties not having to care about the complexity of Nordea's core. So that was the whole purpose. It has taken some time to come to this, I can assure you. But I mean, now when we only make microservices, nothing else, and we can deploy every second week, I mean, there is a beauty to it. I mean, the fact that, of course, we make mistakes, of course, we have incidents, but the fact that we only have deployed small things is simple to roll back within half an hour. I mean, our users never even experienced that we actually have had any such defaults or errors. Everything can be fixed very fast. And then the third thing that we needed to add to this, I was very used to that the best point of a system's lifetime was at the moment it was deployed. All the time after that was a slow downfall into, in the end, a total catastrophe of incidents and so on. That was how systems were developed in the bank. We needed to totally get away from that. We needed to ensure that, because my thinking is that when you deploy a system the first time, you know 75% of what needs to be done. The remaining 25% you will figure out when people start to use your system. So the system needed to be able to get better after it was deployed, when it was maintained. So the whole concept of maintenance had to be thrown out. We had to have a 24/7 perfect operation of the systems, very service-oriented and super keen on fixing incidents as soon as they happen and so on. That, what I hear called the total professionalism. I've stolen that from the UK military, by the way. I like to steal these slogans. So this presentation was in the beginning actually called Creating the New. That's an Adidas shoe. Yeah, so I like this. Steal with pride. Anywho, we needed to be much better than all other teams in Nordea in servicing our solution when it was in production. And I mean, this was the thing that took the longest time to come to terms with. And, you know, having been so many years in the business as I have, you have become a bit skeptical to new models, ways of working, and so on. I mean, in IT, there's always something new coming up. You know, I don't know how many different ways of doing developments and so on I have been through over my years. And it has never really gotten any better until this. This was the first time I could really feel that, wow, what a difference. The fact that I can keep my developers, the fact that I don't have a project, I have a permanent virtual hub where people stay and they just don't develop, they also take care of the things they have developed. So we have an ongoing fabric, and we have taken in the operations people working together with the developers, and my business people working together with them as well. So we know that we are doing the right things with the right priorities, which is very important when you're doing compliance, because you have an external party setting the deadlines, and you don't fuck with those deadlines because they come from the regulator, you know. So that is very important. Agile teams seem to have the opinion that, yeah, you can't really live with deadlines in Agile, you know. It comes when it comes. Yeah, bullshit, I say. Of course, you can have hard deadlines also in an Agile world, because we have proven it. But we also need to be able to deliver much faster. And here came all the things, you know, with automated testing. This was the beauty of the byproduct of working with microservices, that you could automate the processes so much more, which is also then behind the whole, you know, keeping this cycle running faster and faster all the time. We now have a silver license to deploy. I'm going for a gold license because then we can deploy whenever we want. That is my goal. But then, most important of all, to keep it running 24/7. This is a business-critical application or platform. Can't be stopped. It isn't allowed. I mean, there are people out there, people like you, bank customers that do their business with the third parties any time of the day. You should just know how much activity there is 3 o'clock in the night. You know, people gambling, for example, using I will not name any third parties, but you know who they are. Using that third party, you know, creating enormous amount of transactions when I'm sleeping. So there needs to be someone else in Nordea that is not sleeping. My people, my operations people, they discover any incidents that, for example, can then hamper this guy in Caruso who was then on this online casino and couldn't, you know, make the checkout through this third party, which I don't mention by name again, and so on. So, I mean, when my operations people are monitoring the system, it's actually so that Nordea discover any kind of incidents much faster, because we are, of course, you know, the victim of failures in the mainframe system, in the old core systems. So we need to monitor much more than our own application. I mean, we need to monitor all the ledger systems and figure out, okay, I mean, personal customer accounts in Denmark are not available right now and so on. And that signal then goes around the bank. So now the bank knows much earlier also that something is not fully functioning. But that's the way you need to run this kind of business. You need to be there 24/7. These 3 components, you know, the API, separate API interface, the new architecture built on microservices and several layers of APIs, and then finally the BIS DevOps way of working. Those 3 has taken us very, very far on this API journey that I was here and talking about previously in 2017. Now I can say we are of course not done. You are never done. There just come new things but we have made one very significant delivery. We have delivered on this PSD2 monster. Now there comes a PSD3, just so you know. And after that, it comes an Open Finance and more and more and more. So this with the API revolution, I'm not joking, it is a revolution. Much, much more of banking will be done this way going forward. And I think that the banks that didn't do it, like I have just described it for you, the banks that took the shortcuts, they will very deeply regret this going forward, because this will be the way that banking is delivered going forward. I think that we have been quite successful. I mean, these are how the number of third parties using the system, onboarded third parties, has developed over time. And this is how the number of API calls have developed. It looks like you have reached a threshold, but that's not true. It's still continuing, or the usage is still continuing in the same way. But we managed to make some of our applications much more efficient, so you could do the same operation with one API call instead of two API calls. That's what you see there in 2023. It will continue like this going forward. I know I'm not showing any statistics here that has to do with our commercial side, because that's, of course, a Nordea secret. So this is just the compliance part. But the platform we have built for compliance is reused also for commercial. Even some of the APIs we have developed for PSD2 are turned into commercial services and provided to corporate customers, because there is a difference here. Many private persons and small companies are very willing to use third parties for accessing the data and their money and so on. Large corporates, not so much. They have finance policies which probably won't allow it, unless this third party is a big vendor that is vetted and secured and so on, and work within the firewalls of the company and blah, 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 and so on. So the corporate customers, they will also go the way of APIs, but their way will be to get the services directly from the bank, not via a third party. And that we have already then planned for. That kind of transition is slow. I know that from previous technology shifts. And the reason for that is the technology vendors. Because those, I will not mention them by name either, because many of them are sponsoring this event. So that would be maybe harmful for you guys. But anywho, they are not doing anything unless they are paid for it. And that makes that they will be the last one that jumps on a new technology trend. They need at least 20, 100 of their customers knocking on the door, screaming, saying, we need this new technology. Then they will maybe change. And they will then charge the customers for this development. But it will happen, because this technology is so much more efficient than the competing ones. I mean, a large corporate today that is interacting with all systems I have been responsible for, they are using file transfer. It's like, you know, it's like something from the 50s or something like that. I mean, it's a very old technology. It feels, it looks old, smells old, so it must be old. It definitely is. And it's high operational risk. I mean, it has continuous hiccups. You never know where the data is in transit, when will I get it, and so on. There's nothing called real time in that world, and so on. If they can jump to APIs, if they can see the money on the accounts as it is now in the bank, not as it was 1.5 hours ago or yesterday, that is, of course, a major change. If you are sitting at a corporate treasury and very keen on knowing how much dollars do I have before the cutoff, so if I can do this deal or not, or if I have to take an overnight loan. That's very interesting information. And then you can't make do with something that is 1.5 hours old. It needs to be the now information. Therefore, I know that APIs will come big time. And that's also when it will be profitable for the bank, because delivering PSD2, I mean, we are not charging for it. We do it because we are forced to it by law. And believe me, APIs wouldn't have happened if the regulator hadn't forced us. So praise the regulator, because that's why technology shifts happen sometimes, especially in this case. But we will make sure, I mean, I'm a very naive person. I believe that when a company like ours has invested in a very cool new technology, even if we didn't know what to use it for when we invested it, we will make use for it, and we will make good use for it. That's my naive belief. So I believe that Nordea will create a lot of cool commercial products also, and already have started to do, but much, much more down the line. That is what I see. A little more bragging about Nordea's journey. This is the Innopay, is a company that monitor the open banking performance around the world. How good are the banks or the financial institutions' API platforms? That is what they are measuring. They are measuring the content of APIs, but most of all, they are measuring the developer experience on this x-axis. That means that the bank or financial that is over here is the one that is best. That one within that ring is the one providing the best developer experience in the world. That's my platform. So I feel that I can be proud for this position. We have been there for quite a while. We have been fighting with Deutsche Bank. But now, finally, seems like we have started to leave them behind. So don't be shy. Go into our developer portal and figure it out. I said to my people in 2017 that I want a kick-ass developer portal because I believe that is one of the keys for success. They talked about a lot of other things. I talked about that. Because I knew if I could create an awesome developer experience, half the battle was already won. Because I didn't believe that you sell API products through the regular channels by talking to the treasury manager as a corporate or anything, because they simply don't understand technology. This one comes in through the back door. This technology, by convincing people like you, that is how I believe we can also sneak into your companies. Because this is so big difference for you guys that you can use this kind of technology towards us and others. So it makes such a good business case in itself. And then we also have to talk to the one that are actually going to pay for the service, of course. But half the battle is won by convincing the development side. That is my inner belief in this. And therefore, we will continue to place ourselves in that position over there. Now, this is all history now. There is a future, as I said. So this is what I think will happen now over the coming years, because there are much more to come from the regulator side, from the EU Commission. A lot of cool ideas they have, and it's of course not so that the regulator sits there and figure these out. They are picking up the signals, especially they are very then receptive for what the third parties tell them. What do they need? What kind of improvements need to happen to the PS or the open banking solutions and so on? So now there will come a PSD3 or maybe PSR, depending on which paper you are looking at, which will be much more of open banking and give better customer services, and for sure, even a stronger position for the third parties that will survive. Why do I say that? Well, I have seen many use cases or ideas from third parties that are definitely not profitable. So either they have a good exit or they have a good product that can actually then, but many of them will not make it, especially not in the interest environments we have now. But the ones that will survive, they will grow stronger because they will get better services now, more openness from the banks. And the banks will become even less visible, much more sort of the back end to the third parties. But the fine thing is that the services from my bank will be much more present everywhere, previously, we have only been able to deliver our services through our own proprietary channels, you know, the mobile bank or even back in the day through the branch office. Now, our services can be everywhere. The whole concept of embedded banking will grow stronger and stronger. You will not see the bank. You don't have to come to the bank, but the bank will be there. Whenever you are online, when you are in a whatever kind of social environment you're in, there will be banks connected with smaller or bigger services. Usually not by the name. We will lose our customer-facing positions. But there are many companies that lose their customer-facing positions. I think you still will know where you have your account, and so on. So this is what I think will happen now over the next 3 to 5 years, for sure. And I'm so happy to be on this ride because I think it has been extremely fun. And now you're nearly the stop sign. I know it. So I say that this was actually my last slide. Good timing, wasn't it? Thank you for listening, all of you.